Good afternoon, Alex from Amazon Web Services. If you were here in the previous session, I hope you have coffee and cake. If you weren't in the previous session, thank you for joining us here. I have the absolute pleasure of introducing Barnam Bora. He heads up our artificial intelligence and machine learning practice for Asia Pacific. And what we've seen over the last few years is artificial intelligence and machine learning has really transcended the world of technology, and we're seeing it more and more being present within board discussions and business unit discussions. And so I think this is a really important topic for technology leaders to be able to support their businesses and their boards moving forward. And with that, I have the great privilege of introducing Barnam. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, mate. All right. Thank you for coming here, everyone, and thanks for your time. I know machine learning is always an exciting topic, at least for me. It's the reason for my existence in the company. So let's start off with a very specific statement, which is AI is the new normal. Why do people say this? I asked myself that, and I wanted to put some context around it just to make it, reassure myself that it is actually the new normal. In Amazon, it has been normal for us to use AI for a long time. It's probably one of the key ingredients for the different systems like our recommendations engines, our e-commerce, and also managing AWS in general that has helped us reach the stage that we are in today and help our customers. So just wanted to put some context in there as to why this statement is made across many different conferences. So firstly, on the left, you see $80 trillion. What is that? It's the rough estimate of the world's gross domestic product in 2018. It's a very large number, lots of zeros at the end. But why does it matter? This is the combined productivity of the human race. Now, when I fast forward, and this is from a PwC study that came out, in 2030, so roughly just over a decade, we're expected to be at $112 trillion. Now, this is a major growth of human productivity and ingenuity. But the exciting number in that is actually that the forecast that is coming out is at about $15.7 trillion worth of actual growth in the human economy is going to come from AI. Now, what does that equate to? That equates to about 14% of the human productivity in 2030. Now, put that into context, the dot-com boom and the web was probably attributed for about 6%. So AI is well and truly going to be normal and is normal for a lot of us. Now, let me quickly define, before we get into the rest of the presentation, a few terms that you will probably hear across this presentation and many others, and just to put it into context of what they are. Data science, whenever you hear me talk about it or anybody in this conference or any other conference, they're typically talking about the profession of working with data and experimenting with data to build directional systems of intelligence. Okay, so typically it encompasses big data skills, data processing skills, many other things. Within that, artificial intelligence, it's a bit of a broader marketing concept now because of pop culture. And we've watched a lot of those movies ourselves, and it's an Uber concept that encompasses any sort of intelligent agent that is making decisions to arrive at a certain predefined goal and optimize for that goal. Within that, the concept of machine learning, very quickly, it's the art of programming things with probability instead of deterministic rules. And by doing machine learning, it's actually a skill that you can actually go to university or go to an online course and actually learn, as opposed to artificial intelligence, which is more of a broader marketing concept. Within machine learning, important concepts here. Deep learning, again, it's the buzzword of the year. Everybody talks about it. It probably adds about 3x to the valuation of a new startup. So what is deep learning? It's effectively a subset of machine learning where instead of just looking at all of the traditional statistical techniques and machine learning algorithms, the algorithms you specifically use in deep learning are derived from the rough structure of the human brain, where you're using neurons, neurosynapses, and layers to actually build systems of intelligence. And why is it called deep? Well, basically, if you look at the optic nerve in your eye, there's about 10 neurons worth of depth from your eye to your brain. It's about 1,000 by 1,000 image that you see in each eye, and that goes and gets processed in every neuron. When you add many layers to something, it just becomes deep. So hence, deep learning. And one specific aspect which is sort of in that machine learning realm is actually reinforcement learning. What is reinforcement learning? This is where you're not teaching by historical data or examples, you're teaching by making mistakes. So if you go down to the expo floor, you'll see our Deep Racer League over there, where an autonomous car is being trained by multiple different teams. You can take part in it, and to actually drive around the track autonomously, all right? Now, what does that mean in terms of business value? Very quickly, this is what we are observing. A lot of AWS customers are building those directional systems of intelligence that either automate repeated decisions, assist human decisions, predict future behavior, prescribe process improvements, or disrupt by building net new outcomes. Now, there's a vicious and a virtuous cycle in there. And what is that? It's basically generally getting relevant data that could be historical, or that could be simulated, or that could be signals in the hands of people who have the domain expertise to make decisions about it. So taking that domain expertise, it could be data science expertise, it could be the expertise of driving a car, and applying that logic to that relevant data to build an intelligent business system that makes decisions or recommends some certain decisions. All right? Now, within AWS, we've been, using machine learning for a long time, but our mission is to put machine learning in the hands of every developer, and I have specifically truncated a developer because not just data scientist or an AI researcher, because we want to make sure that everybody who's a builder, who is a developer, is able to take part in the economy of machine learning, all right? So here's an example very quickly. We have developers and builders in our own fulfillment centers. This is an example of an Amazon fulfillment center from maybe a few years ago. It's still in operation. And you'll see that there's a lot of aisles in there and humans actually walking and taking objects and putting them into the boxes and then delivering it. Now, this is a great way, and it's worked for us for a long time. But we said, how do we put it further, take it further with machine learning? So here's an example of a fulfillment center from a couple of years ago. This is our Kiva Robotics division, which actually, instead of human beings going down the aisles and collecting objects after miles and miles of walking, we bring the aisles and the shelves to them, right? So this gives us over 50% of efficiency inside the existing real estate without acquiring more fulfillment center real estate, all right? Now, within Amazon, every day we have been, using machine learning for multiple different things at global scale. Another example, Amazon has been doing recommendations and e-commerce for a long time. Here's an example of doing recommendations and e-commerce in a very different way without worrying about the things that we typically would worry about, like transactional history, etc. Here's using computer vision algorithms to look at image similarity models to arrive at buying decisions based on vision alone. Next up, I don't want to go through too much of this. We've been told by many, many customers that machine learning expertise is rare, building and scaling these systems are hard. So these are design inputs into our platform. So we set out to build a machine learning platform that is accessible to every developer, data scientist, and IT professional, and hence it's actually layered. So up top, you see services that can be used without being a data scientist. You can go in, be a developer, just look at it and use it as an API, plug and play for generalistic use cases like vision, speech, language, etc. If you are savvy, if you know how to write a bit of Python code, if you want to utilize a little bit more open source stuff, then we have Amazon SageMaker and the ancillary parts of that end-to-end platform. And then if you already have the expertise of dealing with ML hardware and compute services, etc., then we do not pick favorites. We support all ML frameworks that are popular and in use globally, and we provide the widest array of infrastructure that you use to run this machine learning. But remember, ML is only a component of this. There are over 150 different AWS services that contribute to the entirety of a solution. So it's very important to remember that we are in the business of building end-to-end outcomes and end-to-end solutions, and not just necessarily just an algorithm. And our customers, just to walk you through a few of them, are building a bunch of different styles of systems. Remember, I told you about those 5 different themes that we're seeing. Intuit, the builders of the popular, tax and tax management software in the US, they have reduced their build time for machine learning models from 6 months to a week. Too Simple are a self-driving startup out of China. They have the first ever 1,000-meter advanced planning system for driving semi-trucks down the freeway, using both a sensor fusion technology of LiDAR, short-range camera, and long-range camera. There's a bunch of ML that's going on AWS today, and we have customers like Red Bus in India, the world's largest bus ticket booking platform, that have been able to increase the site visits, etc., by 30% by adopting SageMaker. We have BGL here in Australia, being able to provide fund managers or self-managed super fund managers with transactional accuracy systems with an AI assistant. We have Sunday Insurance in Thailand, who are building a completely AI-based risk modeling platform for insurance. And then in cases like the NFL, which have built a completely new statistical platform to provide new insights to their viewers and increase the viewership that way. But today, I want to introduce two gentlemen who will join me up on stage. So I wanted to hear from two of our most successful ML customers, one a very global household name and one a very Australian household name. So please, I would like to welcome Rob Smedley from F1 and Gus Nalwan, Head of Data Science from Car Sales, to join me up on stage. Gus.
Thanks, Barnam.
Thanks, Barnam.
All right. So first up, Rob did tell me to introduce him as a legend. So I am not going to do that. Is that okay with you?
That was a joke.
All right. Okay. He is a legend in my book. So before we dive deep into the systems that you built, for me personally, and for a lot of us here, we've been inspired by F1 for a long time. And you've spent, close to or more than 2 decades in the heart of it. We've seen you on TV for a lot of years, and you've done sort of so many different things at F1. So I want to come to you first. What are the sort of things that you are trialing with AI, and what are the sort of vision? What is the sort of vision that you're instituting at F1 in terms of AI? And I'm sure everybody wants to hear what F1, being at the center stage of innovation for a long time, has planned with AI.
Well, I think that's the key point, to be honest, is that Formula One, we've always been ahead of the technology curve over the last 20 years. We've always had to build our own technology. We had big data problems before big data existed, and we've come to a juncture really as to where we've solved a lot of the problems, and we have a lot of existing solutions. With more traditional technology, with more deterministic or even stochastic technology. And where we've got to go to next, we've got to go to the next area of technology that's going to give us a good return. The lifeblood of Formula One is car performance, is lap time. And therefore Formula One's got to embrace AI in order to start to extract more lap time out of the cars, more lap times out of the car, more operational excellence. And just something which is better for the sport.
And what is your role? What is the kind of role that you're playing with building the team today? Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I've worked within the teams for the last 20 years. Latterly Williams, and then before that Ferrari. And I just wanted to take a break from that for a short while. And Ross Brawn, who runs Formula One, I've worked with him for a long time, and he's really passionate about trying to explain the sport better to the fan base, and not only to the existing fan base, but to a new fan base. And if we can explain that at a technical level, and we can explain it at an operational level, and we can explain it in what in the business we call human readable format, which means anybody can understand it. Then obviously that's good for the sport. We have a duty of care to the existing fans and a duty of care to prospective fans to try to give them a better product, and that's what we're trying to do. In the partnership with AWS, we're trying to build AI products that explain Formula One at a technical level better.
Nice. Gus, I want to come to you. Rob's sort of shared with us amazing things that he's done at F1. So car sales is a guilty pleasure of mine every night, just swiping through because I live in Singapore, can't afford a car in Singapore. So can you share a bit about what you've been doing? I know we've worked a little bit about the projects that we've been doing and your team has delivered.
Sure. First of all, Rob, we don't sell for F1 yet at car sales, just normal car. So we have a team of AI engineer developer internally, and our objective is just one. We are very obsessed with consumer experience. For us, customer satisfaction experience is number one. Yeah? Because if you don't treat you well, you're just going to run away to our competitors. So we actually research in a lot of AI technology internally to help boost consumer experience. At the same time, also improve our operation efficiency. So one of the technology that we built that was quite successful, this was like 2 years ago, it's called Cyclops. It's an image recognition engine which can identify a car, make, model, body down to the trim level. From just one single photo, actually better than any human. So we use this to enhance consumer experience. So when you sell your car through our portal, you don't need to tell us what car it is. We already know. You just send us the photo. We know better than you. So because of this, it also actually improved our business model as well, because we have a division called Pickle Auction, which actually buy a car of you. If you think actually a good buy, the price you're trying to sell it actually give us a good profit margin. So inaccuracy in your identifying a car is really disaster for us because you're buying it at a loss. So that's one of the AI tech that we built successfully. And recently we deployed another AI tech called Tessa. It's an AI tech that actually approving ads automatically. So when you sell a car through us, prior to Tessa, there is a team of 10 people looking at your car advertisement, eyeballing it manually. There are lots of rules that they need to check. One of them is actually the ratio has to be visible within the photo. And there are 5,000 ads a day, and there are hundreds of thousands photos. So it's going to be one sole eyeball. Yeah. So we use Tessa to actually automate the process. And since then, dramatic improvement. From 3 hours of approval down to 7 seconds only. So it's a massive win. So we continually investing in AI tech and working closely with the various teams to actually integrate the technology into the products.
So when we started working together a few months ago, and what came to mind was you were able to reduce your deployment and productionization time. So can you share a bit about how much that has helped you and the car sales team?
So prior to answering that question, I'll give you a bit of background. Our team is actually not a data scientist. We have like a 6-7 software engineer, which we turn into a citizen data scientist. So for Cyclops, we honestly say that actually we built it from scratch because back then there is no SageMaker. So with the help of AWS, recently with Tessa, remember I mentioned to you that we actually need to build an AI model to actually recognize where is the ratio in the photo. Yeah. So we use a SageMaker. So to build the model, it only takes us 3 weeks. As opposed to when we built Cyclops, it took us 6 months. So this 3 weeks time to build the AI model to recognize the ratio, it's out of the 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks actually spent just looking for the training sets and labeling them. So spending only 3 days just actually to train the model. So that's actually massive efficiency there. Yeah.
So Rob, I know it's a problem for Gus and I, but it's probably not a problem for you. Attracting talent. So can you share a bit about, not just about attracting talent, but how has the culture changed in F1, or what sort of cultural mechanisms have you put into place, and how that has maybe helped or worked in your favor for convincing or getting the right buy-in, etc. I know all of us have to go through different hoops to get there. So a little bit of insight into that.
Well, I think the Formula One's so particular in that you measure how good you are every 2 weeks, and there's no you can't dress that up or add fluff to it. It's in black and white. It's fairly Boolean or binary as to whether you're good or not. So therefore, at my level, trying to convince a board of directors that we need to invest in AI, it hasn't always been easy. And the reason for that is because the board of directors is always keenly interested in what's happening next week rather than what's going to happen in 6 months' time. And more so in Formula One because, you know, it's not, I don't want to say short-termism, but definitely they don't want to, if they can have a gain in a week rather than double the gain in a year, then that's a hard, convincing job to do, just because of, you know, how exposed we are in terms of how competitive the business is. So, yeah, it's not easy, and I think if you're going to change the culture of a company, it has to change there at the C level. It has to change at the board level. They have to be able to invest in it. They have to be able to stomach that cost and accept that cost. You know, and as long as you can, you know, at my level, let's say, as long as I can put together a presentation which would convince them that by investing, you know, this amount of time, resource, and money now, then we can have 2-3 times the lap time return in 6 months, a year's time. Then it's a reasonably easy win. But it's not always easy, I have to say. It's getting easier now because of exactly what you said, that AI is the new norm. But going back, you know, let's say 5 years ago, when I first started on this journey, it was much more difficult.
Are there any specific like organizational changes or, you know, team philosophies changes that you had instituted or suggested that we might?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I had to do was I had to take, you know, at my last team at Williams, what I had to do was I had to take a certain amount of resource, and ring fence that. You know, and it was not only working with external partners. You know, we never worked with AWS at Williams. But we were looking at external partners there. So it's not only working with external partners and trying to build that partnership, build that relationship, you know, because for any AI expert or company to try to understand the Formula One domain is very difficult, and equally it's difficult for a Formula One team to understand the AI domain. Mm-hmm. So it's about you know, trying to get that synergy between the two. But it's also about ring fencing that internal resource as well. You know, it's very, very easy in Formula One to be jumping onto the thing which is going to give you lap time next week, you know, a small amount of lap time next week. And you have to be quite, you know, it was definitely at the start, it was reasonably difficult, and you had to be quite steadfast about saying, no, this ring, you know, we've ring fenced this resource, and that's all it's going to do, and it's not going to give us any lap time for at least another 6 months, a year. And that's a huge cultural shift for a Formula One team.
So on that same vein, Gus, you know, Rob just talked about cost a little bit and being able to stomach the cost early and accept and agree it. What about your thoughts? I know you have some very specific thoughts about cost. Is, you know, we sometimes...
That's the battle that I'm almost facing every month. Yeah? And it's getting easier because once you deliver more value, the business will trust you more. But what I want to say is actually AI is actually is quite interesting because you do not know the outcome, whether it's successful or not, until you build one. Because otherwise you won't use AI, right? So, and then also to actually deliver an AI technology is not really cheap. Because as you know yourself, you go to, a lot of people actually try to hire data scientists, and they're like a unicorn, very hard to find. And are also high-paying job as well. So, you know yourself, if the a business case with a high cost and also an uncertainty of success wouldn't do well when you propose it to the business. So our solution for this is actually to convert our existing software engineer into a data scientist. Because another issue as well, if you hire data scientists, most of them, I actually find out myself, they do not have enough skill to actually productionizing your model. They know how to build a model, but if you want to turn your model into API to serve your thousands of customers, it's impossible. You got to hire an AI engineer to help the job. It means you're actually costing more, right? So go back to the story. We use frameworks and open source code tools to actually help upskill our software engineer. We learn ourselves, we upskill ourselves, and we use existing developer to actually build AI technology. So, and given the AWS SageMaker, one of the tools that we have heavily utilized recently, because we've proven it ourselves, it is possible. And we just hired a junior developer recently. And those 3 weeks time that actually we used to build the ratio recognition was done by a junior developer, just fresh graduate from university. Can you imagine that? This is what happened today. 10 years from now, maybe high school student can do this job. So it's an awesome thing that actually you guys bring in. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about how, I know Rob already said for him it's just lab time, so it's very clear cut. For you and quite a few organizations, there are probably many different vectors that we have to look at, and it's not as clear cut. Can you define a little bit, share a little bit about how you prioritize projects or ventures in your team, and how do you take them to your execs?
Sure. In terms of priority, I take a very straight approach because some of the projects that we're working on have a high risk profile with a high reward too if it is successful. But I need to offset it with a project that's low hanging fruit as well at the same time. And why is that? Because, like I said earlier, the AI is uncertain. If you are executing a high profile, high risk project and it doesn't end up successful, then the business trust will go down. So you got to offset it with the low hanging fruit to gain the trust. Once you get more trust, you can invest more resources into your team to execute the high risk project. So that's really how we actually do prioritization. But in terms of measuring the success, actually quite simple too. If you guys happy, more people selling car through our portal, that's the success for us, really. Customer experience is number one for us. Yeah.
So Rob, you described earlier, could you share a little bit about this, the primary AI system that you've already put into production, especially for the pits?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to, the aim is that we'll develop a lot of products.
Yeah.
And using, sitting on the AWS cloud and using AI. And the first one, actually, we fast-tracked it through. I mean, we only really started to work together in earnest at the start of this year, but by the Australian Grand Prix, which is the first race of the season, we had something which I would consider to be, having sat in a position like this in the middle of a pit wall, one of the most stressful moments of a race is when when the car behind you pits. And if there's any Formula One fans in the audience, they'll understand what we're talking about when we say that car then tries to undercut. What we developed was a tool using AI, so it uses a track model, the timing between the loops. It uses a pit lane model, so how fast a car can be in the pit lane. It uses a pit stop model. It uses tire degradation. There's traffic within the model, and we use the algorithms developed by both by Formula One and by AWS in order to tell us that once that car behind pits, then it projects forward by a lap and it says what will the car's positioning in space be after the second car's pitted. And that's a really stressful, when you sat there and you're the car that's under threat because you haven't pitted, believe me, there's a lot of money riding on it, first of all. And when there's money riding on any decision, it's a difficult decision. And it's just a lot of stress in general. And for a machine, this is exactly what machine learning should be used for. If a machine can do it better than a human, because it can recognize all of those inputs and give you a really clear answer, then that's a fantastic thing for Formula One. And we're already seeing, there's been great fan engagement over that one as well. We're seeing, the major battles at the front between Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton, and we're able to give the fan real insight about, if Lewis has peeled in, then what's that going to look like at the end of that lap? Does Sebastian peel in? Does he do something else? It's really interesting insight, and we're getting great feedback as well.
So this is super exciting stuff, at least for me personally. I'm interested what you're excited about, in terms of what are the sort of net new things in AI and machine learning, or net new things that you're seeing in the industry, automotive or outside of it, that are exciting you, and how does that sort of factor into the new projects that you're probably looking at?
I think I've got to go back to the work within the teams, as well as the work with Formula One management. But there's some really heavy projects that we can get into in terms of car performance, in terms of car development, that we just couldn't do without AI. If you take a Formula One car, the car itself is made up of thousands of different components, but within that, those thousands of different components, there's sub-assemblies of performance components, and there's probably something like 200 different performance parameters on the car. Now, for a human to try to assimilate an optimized solution with 200, with a matrix of 200 by 200 components, forget it, it's not going to happen. And even with, stochastic results, Super Monte Carlo simulation, we're just not doing it because you have to have some level of intelligence. There has to be some level of intelligence, which is why, to go back to the point before about people being expensive, people are expensive in Formula One because they have that experience. They have that experience, they have that intellect, and they're able to assimilate, let's say, even 10, 20 different performance parameters and come up with an optimized solution or somewhere near an optimized solution. And that's what we've been paying people to do in Formula One for the last, eons. But if you can get a machine to take all of that input data and to give you an optimized solution, huge wins.
So Gus, coming back to the projects that you've already done, and I know you've got a lot more in store, much like how Rob said, there's a lot more to attempt. So, a question back to you is, as a person who's actually done a few of these projects, what advice would you give to somebody who is sort of starting their new journey, or an organization that is just maybe already well versed with other parts of technology, but they're only instituting their AI journey now? What advice would you give to them?
Sure. Actually, come from my own experience. So, car sales only started AI like 4 years ago, and 4 years ago was very hard to actually get a business buy-in to actually invest in AI. So, what I can suggest you is the first project that you pick for your AI journey is the most important. Pick a very simple project with a low risk profile, a low-hanging fruit, execute it well. Yeah. Make sure you know the implication when you execute it, when you actually integrate with the existing workforce. There is no pushback. The project that we picked actually happened to be so lucky. We actually used Cyclops to automate the drop-down selection of the car angle from photographers. After taking lots of photos, they have to classify it manually. None of them want to do this job. So when we deploy it, we do not get pushback. They're happy for AI to take over the job. So this low-risk profile project with the no pushback and it's low cost is very critical because we executed well, it was successful, and we get the buy-in from business. They invested more into our team. Our team grew larger and larger. And now we're tackling all kinds of various problems within the business. So my suggestion as well is don't start by just looking to hire data scientists. But what you need to do is invest with your own people first. Find your existing software developer who's passionate to learn. They can learn very easily. Yeah? We've proven it ourselves already. Use existing tools, yeah? Like SageMaker, one of them. Yeah? Use this tool to actually jumpstart your project. Yeah? And I always come with this one philosophy. If you really want to open a restaurant business, for example, right? Would you rather hire a chef who knows how to build the oven or a chef how to use the oven well? So that's really my principle. Yes, if you're working in a company who build a new TensorFlow, maybe you need to hire top data scientists. But if you want to predict the share market and then house price, really, tools will help you for that. Yeah.
So Rob, what would be the one F1 nugget takeaway that you would give to us about building an AI strategy for the organization and actually getting the right mechanisms in place to drive it?
I think be brave. I guess Formula One's always been, as I said at the start, it's always been right ahead of the technology curve, and trying to and so you really do have to be brave. If you go back 5, 6, 7 years when we started to get into AI, we had to have a lot of courage to do it. But I think that now it is becoming the new norm. But you've got to be brave. You've got to go for it, because that's where using platforms like SageMaker, exactly as we were just talking about now. The technology is there. It exists. Use it and let the business accelerate.
Thank you very much. On that note, I think we all need to be brave, as Rob said, and look at AI, because it is, whether we like it or not, it is becoming normal. I like it. It's the reason for my existence in the company. But I would encourage all of you to have a look at the plethora of different services, not just in AWS, but AI in general that we have to offer. And I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, again for your valuable time and insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.